Hi everybody, welcome to the stream. We're back with more RPG game development today. So today's gonna be fun. We get to implement a brand new monster mechanic into the game. Let's talk about that real quick. So, the next few monsters are mage type monsters that we provide certain ability names for, and we provide an MP recovery rate and potentially an MP value, and these monsters will start randomly deciding, based on a percentage provided here, to cast these abilities. This is all brand new. There's not a single thing that this game already knows about these systems, including the mana, so we get to implement all of these today. So let's start with the basics, reading the configuration values into the game so the game knows what to do. To read these configuration values, we did it at the very start of the game. It's going to be under the main Adventures in Lestoria CPP file, and we go under, I think it's just initialize game configurations, named aptly so. Yay, my favorite show's on! Hi, Plasticky! Welcome to the stream. Good to see you. Aww, Plasticky's here. Alright, so we have to load in these configuration files. Now, where are we going to store that data is the next question. Typically, we have some data structures specifically meant to hold all this information for us so we can look it up easily. In our case, we have what's called the monster data class. So we're going to go to the monster data header file, and we're going to make sure we have places to put these in, so we can look them up later and say, oh, this is what my MP is supposed to be. These are what my abilities are supposed to be. The monster class itself holds data specifically for a monster entity in the game. We don't want to directly copy data in multiple places where we know we don't need it. So if we can have all the lookup data in one structure and then the actual entity data when you're playing the game in another, that makes things a lot easier. So here in monster data, we're going to be adding in a couple of properties. First, how much MP do we start with? We're going to call it starting MP. Next, we have the MP recovery rate, which is going to be a floating point value of how much MP recovery per second we recover. In mana per second. Next, we have a structure that holds all the abilities. So an ability consists of 3 parts: the name of the ability, the MP cost in relation to this monster casting this ability, and the percent chance that this monster will cast this ability. So we could add one error check. Here, something that just says, if these percentages add up to more than 100%, something is wrong, because we're going to take these percentages and use them in our AI code later. So since there are 3 parts to this, we're going to create a small structure that defines a monster ability called monster ability data. So we're going to make a struct called monster ability data. And inside here, we're just going to put the 3 properties we talked about earlier. The name of the the name of the ability. Ability name is redundant because it is an ability, so there's no point in putting ability name. Then we have the MP cost. And finally, we have the percent chance of activation. Percent cast chance. So with these three values in, we can now define a monster ability data inside of the monster data structure. And there can be multiple. So naturally, we would use a standard vector for that. So we'll go back down here to our variables, and let's go ahead and add here standard vector monster ability data, and we're going to call this abilities. So we have a structure to hold all those for us. Now that we have all this, we get to make some getters. These are going to be the public functions that are accessible to allow us to access those new variables we just made. So first is what the starting MP would be. Int get starting MP. Notice I don't call it just get MP because that's not what it represents. The monster will start at a certain MP value and it will go up. Monsters don't actually have a mana cap, at least according to the current spec we have. So instead, we are calling it the starting MP. You could maybe start with a mana pool instead of it building up. And that would be fine too, of course. So we have that, and then we have the MP recovery. So let's do that. Also, let's be good about making sure we use const in the right places. So if you make the return type const, it means it cannot be modified. Usually you don't want to modify the return type you get directly because that's just confusing, right? So that's what that is for. And then the second const is to make the function internally const. So this means that everything inside the function will not modify anything directly. So since this is a getter, it does not modify anything about this object. The object itself is considered const. So when we say the function is const, it means the actual structure itself is going to act as const while this function is running. When we make the setter, of course, it is going to be non-const because we need to actually modify it. This is good practice because that way you know, oh, this function's not supposed to modify any state. And you won't make any mistakes if you try to edit state. The compiler will give you an error. It's always good to try to have runtime errors and let the compiler error out before you get to running the actual program and it executes and does something funny, and then you're like, oh, this is actually modifying my structure when it's a getter. Why would a getter modify the structure, right? It lets you detect errors like that early by completely preventing it entirely. So while yes, it is tedious to add correctness to your functions, it is very helpful in code correctness to prevent yourself, the programmer, from running into pitfalls and errors. Not necessarily programming errors, but errors in the actual code intention. So back over here, we also need to get the MP recovery. That will be a float. Get MP recovery. Like so. And we'll make another comment here that it is in mana per second. Next up, we have to be able to get the abilities. So similarly, we will return a const standard vector And we'll make it a standard vector reference because while it's not a very large structure in particular, we don't want it to actually create a new copy of it. It's good practice that if we already have the data stored somewhere and we just need to access it for its information, we just return a reference to it. Returning references for primitive types is a little bit iffy because you would only return it if you're going to modify it later. Otherwise, you really don't need to return for a primitive type. It's so tiny. Hi, hope you're having a good day. I hope you're having a good day too, EA. Thank you, and welcome. Hope you enjoyed the stream. We're going to be doing some fun monster ability implementations today. So, hopefully we get at least one of the mage monsters done today after we implement all the systems for it. It's a whole brand new system. There have been no mage monsters so far that casted abilities or used mana, so this is all brand new that we're implementing today. It'll be a lot of fun. Alright, so in here, this is going to be get abilities. And this will also be a const function. Monster abilities, yeah. Up until this point, monsters have done their own thing and they're just individual attacks, but these are magical monsters that actually perform magic. Hi there, 10x developer. Are you a new streamer? No, I've been streaming for a very long time, probably for 10-ish years at least. I've been around on Twitch before Twitch was Twitch. I was around when it was Justin TV, funny enough. And who's Justin? But yeah, good times. Back when Justin TV actually disallowed game streams when Twitch came out. When Twitch TV came out and Justin TV coexisted, Justin TV said, okay, all the game streams go somewhere else now. So that's actually the reason why this Twitch account exists, because the old Twitch account was a Justin TV account that got banned for streaming game content on a non-game content channel. Like, there was no way to stream the gaming category on Justin TV when Twitch TV came out, because it was all sent to Twitch TV. Just fun little history nugget there. Yeah, but welcome. Gamer discrimination. I know, right? Somehow never found you before. Yeah, I haven't necessarily been streaming my game programming for about a year. We took almost a year break. A little less, but we've been around for a long time. Yeah. Good to see you though, and welcome. So yes, we're working on monster abilities today. I just got the monster data structure updated with some getters. Let's get some set functions in here too. Although I think we actually can access these directly, and that's how we do that. So we're gonna go back to, we're actually gonna open up the monster data CPP file now, because while Adventures in Lestoria.cpp initializes all the config variables in there, it actually calls monster data, initialize monster data, to specifically do anything about monsters. So we'll be in here to set up the config file, like so. So you can already see we have a lot of things to access properties from our monster file. So we're basically just following this template to add on to what we've included here. So first we've got the MP value. So let's do that first. That's very easy. We're gonna go ahead and move back up here, and let's do... So we're gonna first ask if it even has the property, because it might not actually have that. So you can say a may, a me if you want to, a may kr, any of those work. So we're looking if the monster has the property MP, and if it does, we're going to set the MP in the monster data. So here's how we access the monster data. It would be, or actually, excuse me, we have a local variable, monster data, which later gets transferred into our monster data structure. So we get to modify that one. So we do monster.mp, starting MP is going to be set to, and then we just grab this property. So we do dot get int, because it's going to be an int, and we're just going to get the 0th item in the array. And now we have set the starting MP for this monster data if it has an MP property. Now, if it doesn't, it would be 0, right? And you might see here that we didn't actually specify a default value. This could be problematic, actually. So what we can do is we can put an else statement to also default initialize this in a sense. Now we could default initialize in the struct, and arguably that might be the more, I guess, sensible approach, because that way we know for sure, hey, you're gonna start with exactly 0. So arguably I could do it that way, keep the code here to a minimum, just focused on the configuring and not necessarily setting defaults. I think I like that better, and I think we're gonna stick with it. So by default, monsters have no MP recovery, they have 0 starting MP, and of course they have no abilities. Vectors default initialize with nothing in their containers, so I don't really have to default initialize anything myself. Unless I want to. Too bad I am on my workplace, so cannot watch. I'll just have you on my headpiece. Well, that's fair. I'm glad Twitch offers a way to just listen to the audio if you cannot actually tune in. Some folks do that. Just keep a nice little, like, mini podcast or something going for their streamers. And that's always nice too. I appreciate it though. I recently finished a Python class for college. Never tried C++ though. Seems much more complicated. Oh yes, C++ is considered a very difficult language to get into the depths of. On a surface level, you can get away with doing C like C++, and C has very simple syntax, but is used for a very wide range of applications. C++, on the other hand, tries to introduce a lot of safety to C, and naturally that makes the entire language more complex, introduces a lot more features, tries to provide a larger library of features built in to make the programmer have an easier and safer time implementing things in code. The downside to that, you're going to have a lot harder time reading the syntax and writing the code and following it. Your projects can be a lot more expressive, I should say. There's a lot of code expression in C++ compared to something like C. Python, there's quite a bit of code expression. Python has a lot of utilities, a lot of tools. It's also very library heavy. So because of that, there's also a lot to learn when it comes to Python. At least on the outside. Of course, you can develop libraries for C++, but C++ is already so feature-rich that a lot of it is taken care of internally through the C++ standard library. Listen, excuse me, listening to you while eating pho. Oh, that sounds great. I'm glad you're eating pho. I know you told me earlier you really wanted to, so I'm glad you get to. Yay! So we're going to do something similar for the MP recovery, but it is not going to be an integer, it's going to be a float. So we're looking for, specifically, MP recovery. Now one thing I'll point out here, and this is kind of an interesting thing I did, was I didn't ever check if there were any properties that it didn't recognize. So if you like typo a property, it's just not going to read it in, and it's going to quietly, like, ignore it. So that's something we have to be aware of when we're actually writing these things, is that it's going to remain quiet for unknown properties, which can be both good and bad. So this goes under MP recovery, like so. And now we have to populate the abilities vector. So that's a little bit more involved. Also, it's not get float, it's get real. So of course this part remains the same. We have to see if the abilities property exists. And the way this works is, if we look at the structure here, you can have basically an object, an outside layer that with a label, and then inside you can have more sub-items. So you can have like objects and objects and objects. So the way this data configuration file structure works is that it uses the array notation, kind of like how you would access an unordered map or a map. And you just keep specifying, you just keep nesting more and more of these to get deeper and deeper in your object levels. So if we have the property abilities, we should be able to access the abilities key like so. And what we can do is, since we can treat it like an array, we know how many keys there are and we can iterate through them. And I even went back and modified this myself to make it return an iterator. So we can do something like this. I believe the syntax goes, it'll be an auto with two values. The first one is, I believe, the key itself, and the second one is going to be the size. I could be wrong, but that's what I'm going to call them for now. And when we do that, we're now iterating through the keys. Let me just confirm what this actually does. So if I go ahead and I go into the data file header file, and we're looking, when you write your own custom iterator, I believe the iterator requires a begin function. So I think we're looking for that. Yes. So these are autos. Oh, it's just keys. So it's not even... Well, get keys returns a map, and the map has, okay, a string and a size. So I think I was actually correct. Alright, so let's back up. It was indeed the key and a size. So for the key, we can then take it and say, apply that to abilities. So we're going to do abilities.emplaceBack, and by default, monster abilities emplaceBack, and by default structs follow their the variables that were assigned to it in order. So if we go back up to our small monster ability data struct, we see that first it requires a name, then the MP cost, and finally the % cast chance. And then we can come back here and we can write all those in and it will add them. So how do we get these? Well, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to turn this, so I don't have to keep typing it, into its own little variable real quick. So this will allow us to access abilities. I'm just going to call it ability data. And then we can substitute that so we don't have to keep typing this big thing out everywhere. So we're going to emplace back ability data, and we are specifically accessing the name of the key. So it'll look like this. Or excuse me, the first value is the name, so it's actually the key name. So that's what it's going to return here. The key name is Meteor. And then following that are two values. The first index So this will be considered a list. The first index is the MP value. The second index is the percent cast chance. So we're going to grab those now. So it's going to be ability data key. And we can even go one step further, right? And say, okay, grab the ability from, by doing ability data key. Now that'll take it even further. And then we can just say ability 0. So we would do ability dot get int 0. This is the MP cost. And then we would do ability dot get real 1, because we're accessing index 1, and that will give us the percent cast chance. Now it's a percentage, so we're going to divide it by 100 as well. That way it's going to give us, if it's 60%, it would give us 0.6 instead of 60. Is this the first game you've made, or have you made others? I've made plenty of games in the past, not necessarily as large as this one. I would consider this currently my largest programming project I've ever undertaken. When I was starting out as a kid, of course, I would write very small, just silly little, like, examples and test games. And some of them turned out okay, but a lot of them turned out to be scrappy projects, right? That's what you do. You build hundreds, thousands. I would say I have thousands of little demos and games that I've tried making, and some work, some don't. You end up latching on to certain ones and going from there. And I've definitely made a couple of smaller games, so what a lot of people do, right, is they participate in code jams. So the guy who made the game engine I use, OLC Pixel Game Engine, they also host a game jam in their community every year. So for the past like 3 years or so, I actually went through and participated in their game jams. So you can see here I participate in OLC Code Jam 2020, 2023, and 2024 with some missions. So I actually created my own like games for these game jams. So yeah, this is a very boring page for this thing. I wish it had like, it should have like screenshots or something so people know what the game looks like. But yeah, like I made my own little like games for these things too. So, but yeah, it's fun. Who that guy is? It is One Lone Coder is his YouTube channel. Or Javid X9 is what he goes by for his screen name. So if you go to YouTube and you go to One Lone Coder, Hamster Planet, yeah! It's this lad. And he is the one that created the OLC Pixel Game Engine, which is what I use. He is currently in the process of working on the 3rd version of it, which is going to be even more awesome to use. But he has a lot of fun videos about all sorts of fun programming things. He uses his Pixel Game Engine to demonstrate visually a lot of algorithms and teach things with it. So it's a very good way to... Oh, yeah, so this video announced recently shows off a lot of the tech previews for what to expect in PG 3.0. Good video, so... Yeah, but my game is powered by his engine. It's pretty nice. It's just cool. And he also has a great little small community full of programmers alike that you can participate in with and ask questions and share stuff together. It's a lot of fun. I love his community. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I've made a lot of cool little things. I also have a lot of current pending projects, so even before this, I was working on other little games. Like, in my list of repositories, I have hundreds of things, right? We as programmers make tons of projects for all sorts of things. I made something very recently for, like, a local rhythm game tourney I did. just to keep track of things and generate like random song picks and stuff. Yeah. I even made something to block LLM farming bots from scraping my own repository on my own server. They were literally taking up more than 95% of my site traffic, scraping my Git repositories, my code, like AI. So I literally wrote a script that would detect and remove all of them, like software firewall, like blanket ban them. So it's literally just running on my server and constantly monitors it. Have I made any rhythm games? Not really. The problem with making rhythm games is you need music. I don't write music, so I would have to get music from somewhere, and I'm not really too, like... I don't have any, like, novel rhythm game ideas, but I definitely understand how to write them, and I've written a few, like, small demo engines, but obviously without music, I'm not really motivated to turn it into anything crazy, right? So, yeah. Plus, despite me enjoying rhythm games, I only like a couple rhythm games, so there's also that. I only like very specific ones. So, with this, our monsters should now have all their stuff loaded in. At least the Skeleton Fire Mage should. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and build my game. Let me switch back to the release build. And what I'm going to do is once it's done building and running, like the game will load up, it's going to load up this new monster data, and I want to see if the monster data structure now has all this information stored in it. Because if we did it right, the Skeleton Fire Mage will now have 5 MP recovery per second. It'll have these 2 abilities inside its abilities list, and then we know we wrote the configuration correctly. Now we could also write unit tests to make sure that this reads correctly too. So that's another possibility. But yeah, we'll just wait for this thing to build. And in the meantime, we'll start thinking about the next step. So firstly, we need to make the MP recovery work. That's easy enough. Let's go to monster.cpp and we're going to go to the update function. The update function is called for every tick of the game. And you can see here we already have a bunch of timers at the top. So trivially, it should be very easy to add in a new timer for MP recovery. MP recovery is defined as the amount of mana that is recovered per second. So if we make a timer that ticks every second, we can apply that mana recovery to the monster every second. So let's do that now. Last time, I believe I wrote a mana timer just as a placeholder for, hey, we know we're going to be doing this, right? So we actually got a fatal error. So let's take a look at what that is. Error says, warning, image loading for Monster Skeleton Fire Mage failed. So we don't have any image to load. My game requires us to have some kind of placeholder image, even if we don't have the image ready to go. My favorite ones are Hatsune Miku Project Diva. Oh, yeah. I used to play Project Diva a lot, so that's awesome. I even wrote a website. That's actually why my domain is projectdivar.com, that originally let me submit, like, I had a bot that I would run on my stream, and I would literally just have the bot watch my game, and when it would detect a score screen, it would submit the score to my server. Like, this is a score tracking website that would just track, like, you can see how many times I've hit notes and what ratings they were. And, like, it's got my accuracy, it's got how many times I've cleared charts, how many FCs I've got, etc., etc. It shows my best plays. I, like, made a little ranking system, kinda. So, I made all this as a kind of a capstone, like a personal capstone for after I learned how to do full stack web dev. I'm like, it'd be so cool to have a website, and so I built like a back end for it, obviously a front end for it, and I have a database. This is all stored on a database, of course, and then I wrote some other programs. It was a giant like mess of micro services all trying to run together. Full stack is where it's at. Also, hello Moros, welcome. Yeah. So, that was fun. But yeah, I used to play this game a lot. So, I was working on this website. I almost got like super into it. I'm sure in another alternate universe, I would have finished developing like this thing legit and like made it a full ranking system out in public. Obviously I had like test users, and then I had a bunch of bots which signed up, which I think is funny because they all use funny names like handcrafted soft salad. I just thought it was funny. Anyway, yeah, there's that. And there's Scuzzy. He likes Scuzzy. So yeah. Anyways, the error said that we need to include an image for our mage. So we're gonna go in and we're gonna make some placeholder sprite for him. I'm trying to think exactly how I want to do this or what sprite I want to use for now. I guess I'm just using some kind of... Do I have anything like a caster right now? Not really. I guess I'll just end up using a humanoid character, like the pirates, really, are the closest things I can use right now. So we'll just use that as a placeholder. Let's do the bow goblin for now. So I'll go ahead and copy paste it, and the way my game works is it auto detects, or it expects, a tile sheet file that is the same exact name as the monster itself. That was just my lazy way of loading in the correct sprite sheets. So now that all my stuff has arrived, I could set up that Mac Mini. VS Code Remote SSH is truly the chef's kiss. You can debug without being on the Mac at all. Oh, yeah, that... I never thought about that. That's fun. Good for you. I tried to make you a website once, didn't go so well. I mean, you gotta start somewhere, right? Man. You wanna see what my website looked like? Oh, man. I'll show you real quick. God. Throwbacks, right? I think I used to host on BraveNet. Back then, the popular thing to do was, of course, GeoCities, but I used BraveNet because I was weird. So this is 2004. It's the earliest copy I have on my website from August 18. And don't have any expectations, please. WebDev, 2004 Amy WebDev was not great. Ah, yes, here we go. Don't you love it? Yes. The guild. What a great color scheme. You got the boxes. Very nice design, right? Very 2004. Here's my account page, apparently. You'd cringe at my first web dev attempts. I know, right? Ah, yes. Of course, as I went on, I got a little more advanced, so we're talking like in 2005, right? It's like, oh man, look, we're upgrading now. We're better, right? We're better than this. Ah, yes, even more boxes. I think this was like a background image or something. Oh my god, look at this chat box. Wow, so cool. New Maze Maker program I found. Oh, does anybody know Albino Black Sheep? It used to be just a website hosting a bunch of Flash videos and Flash games and stuff, and I got all my favorite links up here, of course. And we got the word art logo? You gotta love the word art. Oh, beautiful. Also, I'm on at 4 p.m. today. Tomorrow I'll be on at 5. In case y'all didn't know. It's so cute. Eventually, oh, actually, I can show you that real quick. Since you were wondering about, like, games I made in the past, right? I can actually show you this. At some point, I worked with, one or two other game developers, and we worked on a website called z-gamers.net. So I believe it's here, but let's hope it's here. I created a whole, okay, this is Sig's Minecraft server, which is like, okay, whatever. But let's actually, somewhere around here, I have a website, and on the website, we of course hosted any games we made. So you can kind of get a glimpse of, oh, this is Blink Forever, so we gotta go even further back. Let me think. So I finished high school 2011, so let's say 2013-ish. This is probably the last time the site was in a decently usable state. Nope. Lying. Okay. Alright. Struggling here. I'm trying. Oh, there we go. It was a redirect. Okay. Hopefully? Not what I was looking for, but close. We're getting there. This was by the time I got to my 5th year of, or my 5th version of my website, it was a little more, like, developed, right? I started showing off my bigger titles I had. So I had, like, a Battle Tanks game, loosely based on a Battle Tanks game I used to play, a tower defense, everybody's gotta make a tower defense, some kind of, like, RPG fighter kind of game, a very simple, like, dodge the blocks kind of game, block dodger, yeah. So by this point I was a little more experienced with, like, the JavaScript aspect, so I went ahead and made a bunch of, like, funnier things with the website. But that's not what I wanted to show you. I was hoping I could show you the actual site that we used, but I don't think, maybe it was I don't think it was 2009. I really doubt it. Anyways, I'm getting too sidetracked. I was just hoping to find... Oh, I found it. Here it is. So this website, yeah, we had some games on here. It wasn't like anything crazy, but you can see the design of the site is still very primitive, of course. And I had a bunch of, like... So this is what I was talking about. When you're starting out with game dev, you just make a bunch of, like, little projects, all sorts of side projects, right? So each one of these blocks is like a bunch of games, and we just made a bunch of, like, mini games. None of these are anything that take longer than a couple minutes to play. So it's just like, it just shows as an example, like, here are a list of, like, game projects and such. And we used to have, like, high score tables too. That was our big thing, right? We're trying to make a website where you could play games, you submit on leaderboard, compete, blah blah blah. Of course, we didn't know anything about backend, so everything was done on an external service, and it was probably done in a very unsecure way. Like, there was no validation, so you could cheat, blah blah blah, right? Yeah. Anyways, that was just a throwback. That was fun. 2009. Yeah, insecure. So we're back here. I did say I was just gonna use this sprite sheet as the skeleton fire mage for now. So I'm just gonna make it red to pretend, right? Let's just let's see, let's adjust the hue to be red. All right, you're red now. Okay. And I'm just gonna snap them to our palette real quick, just to give us something to work with for now. So I'll go ahead and save that. And we'll just do the default stuff. So we have idle, walk, attack, and death. Now what I plan to do is make it so we have like a casting animation. So the idea is every monster that has abilities has the ability to cast. So you need to have some kind of like casting animation. If we can't find a casting animation, I'm thinking of what I should do. I could just play the idle animation, but I was also thinking that we just force us to include a casting animation for every caster. That way we're kind of forced to cater any sprite sheet to any caster to actually have a casting animation. So that's really cute. I should do more personal projects like that. And for a hobbyist developer like me, that kind of makes sense. I just made whatever I wanted on a whim, and it was a lot of fun. And of course I learned a lot too. And that's kind of the goal, is you just have fun, you make things to try and make things. Not everything succeeds, and not every failure is a lost cause. Failures are learning experiences, and that's what you have to take away from this, is you make hundreds, thousands of things. Nothing's gonna work at first, and that's normal. That's how it's supposed to be. So as an example, we can make this just the casting animation as well. So I'm just gonna duplicate this. These are 36 by 36. At least they look 36 by 36. So we're gonna need 36 times 4 is 144. So I need to add 144 to this, which is 656. We just paste those down here. And somehow these are supposed to fit right in the middle here. And what I usually do for casting, to indicate casting, I think I mathed that wrong. It looks a little off. Either I mathed wrong or I didn't... Yeah, this doesn't look right. Hold on. Something's not right. Was I wrong then? Are these... Actually, these are 32 by 32, I think. Let's see. Which... Yep, they sure are. Alright, well, we're eyeballing it. We have enough space to do it, so... These are just placeholders. I typically like to make a little outline. And this outline is just a red glow to indicate they are casting something. I don't know why grow made it look like it oh, I have the inverted selection that I want. So we're going to grow by 1, and then that's going to be red. Or as close to red as our palette allows us to be. So it's going to look like that. Not quite everything else, please. I don't know why I have everything else selected, jeez. Okay. And there we go. So, that's kind of what I use for casting as an easy way to indicate any casting. Oh, now Morris is on YouTube. Excellent. My problem as a hobbyist is I don't have a lot of whims that can be expressed as little projects. My last little project was way bigger than a little project. Oh, I know. Sometimes your big ambitions don't work out. I say sometimes, it's usually most of the time, right? There's plenty of big things that I'm just like, I start on it and then I'm like, okay, this is either too hard, it's out of scope, it's out of my knowledge range, which it's okay if something's out of your knowledge range. You have to do the research and learn the hard way, but sometimes that process is not just like you working on this project. It might be you working on something which leads to another rabbit hole to work on something else, to another rabbit hole to work on something else, and then maybe a year or two later you come back to it and you're like, oh, now I'm ready to work on it. Yeah. Anybody that loves to do programming as a hobby, they just have a mountain of code that either doesn't work or they never finished. I'm really interested in cybersecurity, but sometimes the tools I'm interested in trying are super expensive, so I have to rely on simulations. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. A lot of the enterprise software is way too expensive for any single person to afford. And unless you're in a business that can offer you personal licenses, you don't really get to be hands-on with the actual stuff. It's all simulated, of course. Yeah. I feel you. I had to do a lot of that for networking. My previous job was being a network engineer, so a lot of the times we didn't have access to like the expensive Cisco software we would need, or like the Juniper software. All the enterprise stuff is out of reach, so instead we'd be like, oh, let's just go use a little simulator, some open source like Java app that somebody created or something, you know? Just to get a feel for what it's supposed to be like. So now that I made the image, the next thing I have to do is destroy the current asset pack, and then it's going to recreate it with the new asset inside of it. And let me fix this. This is supposed to be like the mana recovery timer, and we'll go ahead and implement this real quick. So the way we get this is, or the way we do this is we reduce the mana recovery timer down towards 0. When it hits 0, we're going to recover mana. How much mana? We're about to find out. So we're gonna go somewhere down here where we can check for that. I wonder where all the other checks are, because I don't see, like, even though we reduce these, we must use these elsewhere, but this is for the monster update function itself, so we're going to be doing it here. So we're going to say if mana recovery timer is less than or equal to 0, then we're going to perform a mana recovery and set the mana recovery timer to whatever the mana recovery timer is supposed to be. Now, what if the mana recovery timer for a monster is typically 0? Are we just gonna run this every single frame? That sounds stupid, right? So there's a couple things we could do. We could see if the mana recovery timer max is not 0. If it's not 0, just don't run the code. That sounds like the easiest solution to me. We could even go as far as calling this like has mana recovery, right? Or what if we say has abilities? You don't need to recover mana if you don't cast abilities. So if we just check the abilities list, then we would know, right? So our function would look something like this. If has abilities, run the mana recovery timer code. Now, I've been liking this lately. If I don't want to write a separate function just to check, like, oh, is this property true? Then I like to create a const boolean that checks that for me instead. It's like a mini function, but I don't have to actually write a whole function just for this, because the reason why I'm trying to avoid writing like tiny little personal functions is just look at this monster function. Do we really need another function? I don't think so, right? If it's not something of public importance, then why should we add to this painfully long list already? That's what I'm trying to avoid. I'm starting to realize, like, some of these very personal, like, checks don't need to each have its own function. We don't need to access it anywhere else. All the functions! More functions! Please no more functions. So to find out if we have abilities, we have to check our monster data. So the way we do that is by going, we definitely need a getter for get abilities though, because we will be using that. So let's make one. And it's just going to return a reference to the vector that's inside of its monster data. So monster ability data reference get abilities. So it's actually going to reference the monster data version directly, which is what most of these getters do. Most of these getters only care about the stuff inside of its monster data. So you can see here, like, to get the unconscious time of a monster, we just look at its monster data. And we'll be doing the same thing for our function here. To get the abilities, we just call that, but instead we would say dot get abilities, which we already made earlier. So that's going to return what we want. We don't have to do anything else here other than specify that this is part of the monster class in the source file, and that way it knows where to get name from. So now we're back up here. We can know if we have abilities by checking if get abilities dot size is greater than 0. Because if there's nothing in there, then this will be false. And one other thing I like about doing this const bool thing is that it almost looks like pseudocode, right? We can literally read it as pseudocode. If has abilities, then reduce the mana recovery timer. So then we're down here. If the mana recovery timer ticks down to 0, we're going to reset it. But this code will also run unless we don't have abilities. So we can include that again, or we include them both in the same block of code so they're next to each other, like the relevant code is all together. But all the timers are up here, so I'm going to keep this pretty close, but I'll move it down just a little bit, and I'll move the timer code up to be inside this block because it also should only run if we have abilities. Once mana recovery timer hits 0, we're going to perform the mana recovery. So we're just going to set MP plus equals whatever our mana recovery is. So funny enough, I was originally thinking it was supposed to be a timer, but it's actually just the mana amount itself. So const float get MP recovery, again, also comes from our config. As it doesn't live in here, we just make a helper function to get it from our config. Like so. Oops. I'm just making a mess. And this is get MP recovery. Just like that. So MP will be increased by get MP recovery. And then the mana recovery timer will be set to 1 second again. So it's always running on a 1 second timer. And that should be it. Sorry, fell a little bit behind. I'm trying to learn how to effectively use an Objective-C API from inside C++ without half a megabyte of boilerplate code to bridge the gap. As Johnny 5, more functions, Amy, more! God. Yeah, I like doing that. It's because basically I would just be writing a function that returns, oh, is this part true? So then I'm just like, well, I might as well just use a boolean. I don't have to include parentheses or pass in parameters, and I know exactly what I want here. It's just nice and easy. Because I could put this here, but then I'm like, why am I checking if I have more than 0 abilities? What does that mean? It means I have abilities, so it just makes it more clear. If I want to label it. One way I used to do labels too, or like mini comments, is I'd be like, has abilities code label. So I would use goTo labels as a way to describe what this code is. But that's usually pretty silly. We don't usually need to do that. I wouldn't actually use these as goTos, but I would write that in because that is valid syntax. Okay, so mana recovery's done. Let's try to build and run the game again now that we have a skeleton fire mage image to use. And we're just gonna check to make sure the monster data is correctly populated with this monster's mana recovery information. Also, I missed saying goodbye to EA. But glad we got to chat. That's nice. Wonder why it says 1 second. Okay. I'm like, I wonder why it says. So YouTube has a top chat and a live chat. I'm guessing if you have a very busy stream, then the top chat would help you filter out, oh, the ones that talk the most often or follow your channel or whatever. That way, the folks that are more relevant to your stream, I guess, get priority. I think that's what that feature, that's what it sounds like that feature would be for. That's like if you have an API that uses ints for everything, like State Manager, but you want to have something more expressive, so you use const expression or enum classes, or my personal bugbear, using. Yes, I love using. Using is very silly. Do we have one right here? Sometimes we do. I mean, there's the enum, there's direction. But yes, we do have using sometimes for fun. There might even be some at the top here. So like strategy name, right? I usually use it to describe what the arguments are if I have a standard pair or if I have like a standard map. Because I want to know what the key and values represent. So sometimes I'll fill those in with usings. But it can also get very confusing if you're not careful. Because then it's like, well, what is that then? You just made that up. That's not a standard thing. How am I supposed to know? Did my game run? My game didn't run, did it? Oh, build failed. Unresolved external symbol. We didn't do monster data get abilities. Oops. So let's head back to monster data and implement that. Oh, we didn't implement any of these. So we have to do all those real quick. So in the header for monster data, we added in the following. We added get starting MP. You can even see they're highlighted here, indicating something needs to be done about them. So we naively assumed we implemented these already. Although it's very simple, it just returns the local variables. So starting MP is MP. Or excuse me, I made it more descriptive. I did call it starting MP. And then we have get abilities, and we have get MP recovery right here. So that's all the stuff we're gonna be doing. Thank you, Visual Studio, for being dumb with multi-select. Oh, God. I could still make this work. It's quite silly, but yes. There. Okay. Yes. And then... It's because I had that comment there, which kind of caught me off guard. I need to remove it, though. So this is MP recovery. Apparently it doesn't... Oh. If we do monster data, it will exist. It's like, God dang it, Visual Studio, please just do what I need you to do. Ah! Alright. So there we go. That's a header modification, so that's... No, wait. No, that's just a source file modification, so that's not a big recompile. We should be happy after that. I would hope. Yep. Excellent. So we're back. Accessing out of bounds list item 0 of interface. Okay. Weird, right? Why are we doing that? So we're initializing with monster name Skeleton Fire Mage, has property MP. Oh, I forgot the MP part of it. Yes. So we have to add in that string after the fact. And there we go. Just a little oopsie. Aw, Visual Studio never worked for you? Damn. But yeah, it's great when it's working. But yes, VS Code is also fantastic. Oh. Turn that off for now. Oh, so we're just checking the monster data structure, so we can pause here. Let's just breakpoint on some random monster. And we're just gonna take a look at monster data. So we're looking at the Skeleton Fire Mage, and we're looking for the new things we added. So we can see starting MP is set to 0. So the fact the key exists in here is a good, well, yes, the fact the key exists in here is a good sign, although every monster has this. So MP recovery did get set to 5, so that's good. And the abilities, there are 2 abilities, so they got properly allocated. Meteor with MP cost of 50 and a percent cast chance of 60%. And Firebolt with an MP cost of 20 and a 10% chance of being casted. So that matches our configuration file. So we have properly imported those. So now we can move on. Before I continue, I want to test to make sure mana recovery actually works. The way I'm going to do that is actually to write a unit test. Because while I could just test it in game again like I did by debugging variables, I would like to actually write the unit test in case in the future MP recovery breaks. We also need to test those cases of, okay, monsters without abilities should not be recovering MP, while monsters that do have abilities are recovering MP. So we need to test for that. So in here, we're going to be writing a new method called monster mana test. More like mana recovery test, right? So we're gonna need a monster that has mana recovery to test this with. Are we gonna make one up, or are we going to use... I guess we could just use the actual Skeleton Fire Mage, because we loaded up, I believe. Let me just triple check that. Because I know in the past we didn't. So we have initialize strategies, initialize monster data. So I think we're good to go if we use that. So instead of using this test monster, we're actually going to create a Skeleton Fire Mage directly. Yeah, because we can see here in one of the previous tests we spawned a parrot, and a parrot is a default monster in the game. So this time we're going to spawn a Skeleton Fire Mage for a test. It is one of the first monsters that has mana recovery, so we would expect that it would work like this. So, we have to perform a game update for it to spawn into the world, and then after that, we can do whatever we want. Also, it's not a parrot. Fire Mage. So for the Fire Mage, we're looking to see what the current mana is. So let's assert test for 0. So we're going to say assert are equal. So is fire mage dot MP. Now we don't actually have a get MP function. I feel like get MP, would we care about MP in anything else? I guess not. So maybe we can just test it internally here. So we're kind of cheating, but at the same time, I don't think we need a getter per se for it. So we're gonna test to see if MP starts at 0 like it should. And we're also going to write monster starts at 0 mana. And let's also test what the MP recovery rate is supposed to be. So get MP recovery. So this should be 5. Monster has... well, it might not necessarily have 5. We could adjust it. So this is one of those things, again, where we have to read from the config file to know, hey, this is the actual value. Check against that to make sure it's working. So we're gonna have to go in... I guess we could check it against monster data. But that's exactly what it is initially anyway. So are we just making sure the mana recovery is set correctly? Because I guess that's what we're looking for, right? So we need to know what it falls under. I think it falls under monsters. Yes. So if we do... I guess we would have to do the same for the other one too. Okay. I mean, that's fair. Data... dot... am I just going to use dot syntax now? Because I think you can use dot syntax, but you have to use it in one of these. So it would be like, get real. No, it would be, get property. Yes. So one of the comments is you can use it via a convenient name, including the dots. So get property allows us to do monsters dot skeleton fire mage dot MP recovery. And so we do it that way. And then we do dot get real and see if that is equal to whatever the current MP recovery is. And we can even put that in here by saying monster has blah blah blah. MP recovery. Because it's going to be unknown, so we're going to have to use W format and supply this value. Although I feel like that's redundant because the assert actually tells us what the values are supposed to be. So monster MP recovery matches configuration. That's really what we're testing here. Or I say should match configuration file, because if this assert pops, it means it's not true. So we'll write it like that. And the same will go for the monster's MP. We're basically looking for that as well. This is a float, so I'm going to cast it to a float. The tests have automatic float precision, like range checking, so it shouldn't be a problem if I downcast it, because real is casted to a double. So we're going from larger to smaller type, losing precision. So monster MP should also match the config file. So we will go ahead and read that into. However, it is not a float. So we will use getInt instead. And the key is called MP. And so with these two, let's go ahead and try to run this test. First, we just need to build, because if we build, it will create the tests for us. Then in our test explorer, we should see a pop-up under monster tests. Once it's done building. Unit tests are a little tedious to build, but at the same time, they're very worth doing to make sure at least the fundamental game mechanics are working and don't break. If they ever behave differently at any point in time, it means we messed with that code and something's going to be broken. So I always see very high value in unit testing, especially for systems that are very gameplay specific. Making sure damage works, damage calculations work, status effects work, abilities work, collisions work. If those things stop working in a game, then the game pretty much just doesn't function. You might as well not have a game if your basic game mechanics don't even work. So there's a lot of value in testing the actual game, core game mechanics. And this right here is a game mechanic. Yeah, so in our case, we expect that the MP and MP recovery systems work in a very specific way, and I want them to always work in that way. So I'm going to make sure that those systems are doing what I expect them to, right? Instead of, because the monster is not really forward-facing, I would have to put a bunch of debug variables on screen and watch them, make sure they're doing roughly what I need. This is one of those things where it's like, well, we could just do it with unit testing, then we just know it works. All we have to do is finish it up. Like, we could naively assume that what we coded is correct and the mana recovery is working, but we'd have to actually debug and look at those values internally to see it. My game doesn't have, like, visible health bars. I could make a debug mode that does that. The mana is not even visible at all, so we would have to write something for that. Then, how about checking, once we implement the monster casting, does the casting work? Does it subtract mana correctly? All these things are important. So I'm running this test now, and it just passed, so these two are correct. Yeah. Hamster Planet backend was fantastic, by the way. I'm very happy for what you did with that, so thank you again. That was very fun. So now that we have this, we're going to test the actual mana recovery. After 1 second has passed, we would expect that the mana actually goes up by... Well, the mana is actually going to go up after a certain amount of time has passed. So whatever happens next, the next update tick, that is... Yeah, just the next update tick. Even if it's 0 right now, the mana recovery timer is still 0, so technically it should tick after one more game tick. So we should now expect... Let me save this real quick. Const float MP recovery. So is this supposed to even be a float? I don't even think that's the case anymore. I think MP recovery is supposed to be an int. First I thought it was going to be the MP recovery rate per second. But now it's actually the MP recovered. Well, it means the same thing. It's how much mana is recovered per second. Do we really need it to be a decimal? If we want 1 or 2 or 3. I guess a decimal would be fine. I'll leave as a decimal. It'll be a little more flexible. It's just we can't increment the main MP value by decimal, so we would have to store that decimal remainder somewhere. So it doesn't make sense to have an MP recovery that is a float, I would argue. So I'm just going to change this now because this makes no sense, right? Why is MP recovery a float if we can't have partial MP values? And I don't think we're supposed to implement a system where you can recover half an MP, although it'd be like, if it's 0.5 mana per second, then in 2 seconds you get 1 mana. So it's like, do I code the remainder system or not? I guess that's left ambiguous. Maybe including that capability is a good idea. It's not very hard to do. Maybe we'll do it. Maybe. You know what? You know what? Let's do it. Let's do it. Okay. I feel like there might be some merit in having an MP recovery system where we can have partial amounts of MP that eventually leads to a full unit of MP being regenerated. I could see some monsters just having a really slow mana recovery rate, but eventually recovering enough to do something. Not gonna lie, working with the guys on PG3 feels like we're like the most responsive, fast-acting dev team I've ever worked with. Yeah, it's awesome to see y'all work and cooperate and throw out a bunch of commits and have some fun with it, right? I love to see that. It's probably the beauty of open source, or just working together in general. It's not necessarily open source yet, but yeah, y'all working on it. It's awesome to see, for sure. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. MP plus equals get MP recovery. We need to get the remainder from this. So to get the remainder, I think the easiest way is to do mod, or fmod 1. That would get us the remainder. I also think... Is that what that means? Yeah, modulus is the remainder, right? That's literally why the function exists. So we need to store somewhere our mana remainder. So we need a variable for that. Mana remainder. Okay. So the mana remainder will increment by fmod MP recovery, comma 1. It's the trust me bruh open source. Javid's trusting us to not have a secret repo where we snipe his release. Yeah, of course, of course. Like, y'all have been together for quite a long time, so it's a very trusty team. Long is relative, I guess, but from an outsider's perspective, it's like, oh, this team is very much like a group of trusted folks collected over many years, right? It's like there's enough signs that said people are good, trustworthy people. Yeah. That's really how it goes. That's how everything in life works, right? Everything's built off of trust. You can't have meaningful, close relations with others without trust. Yeah. When it's PGE, you all have a common goal. You all come together. You butt heads together. It's funny how that works. Okay, so mana remainder goes up. So if the mana remainder ever goes above 1, we subtract 1 from the mana remainder and add it to the MP. Let's use a while loop, although the while loop should never last forever unless the mana remainder is broken. While mana remainder is greater than 0, or we can even say while mana remainder. No, that's dangerous because it's a float. Alright. While it's greater than 0, mana remainder equals... I'm actually going to throw a standard max here because I never want it to dip below 1. It shouldn't. Or 0. It never should dip below 0 because otherwise that's an error. I guess that's a good way to say something stupid happened, right? Something really stupid happened. Also, this should be 1, not 0. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do mana remainder minus equals 1. I guess there could be like floating point rounding issues though. Yeah, I might as well just do standard min here. Because there's no way if we subtract 1 when it's greater than 1, it will ever be negative. Then something really, really bad has happened. Or standard max. And this is not minus equals, and this is mana remainder minus 1. I'm just all over the place. But that is our intention right there. While true, go burr. Yeah. I feel like you could just really mess with somebody by being like, just throw one of these in your code, just be like, while true break. And then somebody's gonna come by and look at Lair and be like, huh? Why is this here? It won't do anything, but it's there. Or like, I wonder, let me think about this. What is the behavior of a code like this? What is the behavior of this code? While true, go to line. On the next line, you have something, right? It's like, the true only applies to this, right? So you literally just go to the next line. Oh no. No, not the sometimes not true. Oh no. Yeah, you could really mess something up with that. I think your IDE, if it's smart enough, should change the color of it though, right? So somebody with proper color syntax highlighting should be able to tell, right? Yeah. Because now it's purple, and it's like, wait a second. All my other keywords are pink. Why is this purple? But yes. Anyways, I think the point is you can write some really pointless lines of code and just make people scratch their heads. I mean, I'm sure we write code all the time where we're just like, this literally just doesn't do anything. It's like, this is pointless. Why is this even here? So anyways, that's the mana remainder. We'll also test if the mana remainder works right, because that's important too. So back to the unit test. So we have our mana recovery. We decided floating point mana recovery is fine. We'll have remainders for that. But on the next tick, the monster should have mana. So we're gonna check for that next. After one tick, does the monster have MP? So MP should be equal to whatever the initial MP is. I guess I'm going to store that too. Monster... Initial monster MP. It's kind of confusing to use relative stuff because this might change. I think that's why initially I did the test monster thing. I could be like, I know for sure the test monster I coded in here has this exact amount of mana and will only behave this way. It won't change in the config and I won't have this issue, right? So I guess that's my only like real downfall here, is by reading from the config, is that I end up having this problem. But yeah, I'm getting everything situated here. Also, that's not right. It should be this in here. That was the whole point. And then MP should now be the initial monster MP plus the MP recovery. That would prove that the MP recovery rate is working correctly. Monster MP should increase by the MP recovery rate. I mean, if I'm gonna use a test monster to test, like, a different MP recovery rate anyways, why didn't I just do that in the first place? Anyways, this should be an int. Or rather, the way it works is the integer portion of MP recovery is the part that gets recovered, and there would be a remainder. Do it truly at compile time with const expression boolean true equals something. That's scary. Can you even name it? I don't even think you can name a variable that, unfortunately. Expected an expression. Yeah. Compiler doesn't like true. Curses. Yes, because now you're dealing with the compiler, and compiler's like, wait a second. True is a keyword. It's not a function. It can't be a function name. We're really trying out here. Okay. Let me run this test real quick. Oh. Apparently we're still running tests. Let me stop that real quick. And you're stuck. Gotta love the test explorer. Just gets stuck. There'd be a lot of problems if you could do that, yes. I'd have a lot of questions, and it'd be very scary. I forgot, I'm supposed to run these in debug. Debug ends faster than run does. I don't know why, but it does. Come on! Yes, it has like a 30-second timeout or something. I haven't been able to figure out how to bypass that timeout. I'm pretty sure it's some weird, like, test suite configuration value you could do. Alright. So after we test this to make sure the MP has gone up, let's change the Skeleton Fire Mage's MP recovery value. Just like on the fly, we'll change it, and then we'll test, because Because this was like an initial one. So if we do an update again with 0 seconds added, Monster MP should not be affected, so it should still be the same as the last test we just did. So I can store like new Monster MP is this, or it should be this, right? And then I can say, alright, so it should still be the same thing. It shouldn't have changed. Monster MP should not increase until a second later. Then we're gonna let 1 second of time pass. And after 1 second of time passes, it should have ticked up again. So that makes the new Monster MP increased by another amount of MP recovery. Monster MP should increase again after 1 second. And then after this, let's adjust the MP recovery and test the remainder. So we're going to be doing Fire Mage. Well, we would have to modify the data. So maybe we should get a new monster and test it that way. That way we're dealing with something from scratch here. So let's just make a new test monster, I guess. Or we can modify the test monster that was up here specifically for this test. Because this gets redone every single test, so we're not poisoning other data. So let's just say test monster data. Or we can go in here even. Okay. So this test just ran again. I'm not sure which parts of this it finished. It's kind of unclear, so I'll run it one more time now that the compile is done to test all the asserts we've written so far. Yeah, because it's just not clear that what we just passed. Did we pass all the lines, some of the lines? Okay. Test is still passing, so far mana recovery is working as we would expect. So let's adjust this monster data. We're gonna adjust the MP recovery to be like, let's say 0.5, right? That's a good amount. Oh, can we not access this? Do I want to make it accessible for the sake of testing? Or do we make a new monster data? But it's not accessible in here either, is it? Oh, it is. It's a struct, but it's private. Yeah, these members are private. So yeah, I would have to make a setter, which I don't want to do, which is why I think I added stuff to the constructor in the first place to do this. Ooh, do we get to use the struct syntax where we get to specify a certain parameter? Actually, I don't think that works in Visual Studio. I know in GCC, at least the last time I tried it, there's a syntax you can do where if you have a struct and you don't want to specify every single parameter or optional parameter, then when you initialize said struct, you can do, like, let's say these are all the mandatory parameters, right? So like name, display name, keep going, HP, attack, XP, drops. And then we get to the optional parameters. And if you want to skip a optional parameter, you actually can, and you just specify size colon, and then you provide like some value. And you can initialize structs this way. I know in GCC you can do this, but in Visual Studio you can't. So I'm not sure. It's kind of unfortunate that you can't do this, because I would like to do that. Oh wait, I think it's dot size. Let me try that. Yeah, that's what it would be if we were in like GCC or something. And it might even be this? I don't know. It's something like this. I used it before in like something... Oh, okay. Mixing designated and non-designated initializers is non-standard in C++. Oh, this only works if they're all designated, I think. Is that right? Let me try this. Well, I assume we're writing like the constructor itself. We have to do this for every single parameter. A designator cannot be used with a non-aggregate type. So it's non-aggregate. We'd have to have something without a default constructor. I think you can do it in Visual Studio also. Okay, it appears that it is almost working. It's just this is a non-aggregate initializer according to the compiler, so it won't let us, unfortunately. Good to know though. The only reason I say that is because I would like to make it so I can just specify them on the fly if I add them to the default constructor. I don't really get much of a choice here. I could add another version of the constructor where I just specify the mana, which is like, sure, right? I could make this as like a very special case, or I could just give monster tests access to monster data. I think I'm just gonna go with that. So we're gonna do the classic friend class. Monster tests. And then it will have access to it. At least it should, in theory. Is this invalid friend declaration? Is it just... Am I dumb? Is this not how you do it? Let me think. I thought that's how you do it. Don't I do it for monsters? I'm pretty sure I did it for monsters. Let me see. Friend, class, blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's in a namespace. That's why. Okay, that makes more sense. I didn't realize it was in a namespace. So just couldn't figure out that. So compiler should be happy now, I hope. And do we need anything else? So now we can go back here, and I should be able to do fire, or not fire mage. I should be able to modify the test monster now, or even the fire mage monster data. I'll do the test mage, test monster, or data test monster. So now I should have access to it? Maybe? Well, either way, I know it's supposed to be MP recovery. It's monster data. MP recovery is inaccessible. Monster test is not a class or namespace name, so it just can't find it. How did I do it for monsters then? Let me see. How did it know this existed? Oh, I just made it up here. I just literally made a namespace and a class. Basically, I just mimicked the structure of what it would look like in a test in here. Literally just made it up. Oh, also it's monster test. I see, I see. So it looks like that. Okay, so that might actually work now. Thank you, Moros, for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed, and have a good one. We'll see you later. Okay, so I think we're good now. That one is a friend class, and I can access MP recovery. So that's good. We can test it however we want now. So, and I'm fine with giving the tests access to private members because, well, they can kind of do whatever they want with the values. I'm not going to, like, it doesn't affect the game in any meaningful way. It makes it easy for me to test, and that's what we want. We want some flexibility in doing that. So this is not Raylib, this is another library called OLC Pixel Game Engine. Similar concept though. Except Raylib's in C and OLC Pixel Game Engine is in C++, but they both kind of share the same realm of, here's a framework, this lets you draw stuff, here's some basic functions, have fun. You basically have to write the engine. So, same idea. You get a screen, you can put pixels on it, you do the rest. Okay, so here we're just saying the MP recovery to 0.5. This means every 2 seconds we'll get 1 mana point from a test monster. So let's go ahead and spawn in the test monster. I don't know if it's test underscore. Oh no, it's test name. Oops, so I messed that up. So test name is our test monster. So we're gonna spawn that guy in. This is test monster. So we're spawning it in. It starts out with 0 mana, but we're giving it 0.5 MP recovery. So we expect after 1 second, it still has 0 mana. Let's do some asserts. So again, test monster after spawning should start with 0 mana. Monster... Test monster should start with 0 mana. And then after 1 second, test monster should still have 0 mana. We could even poke into the remainder value. So at this point, we should be able to do another assert that says the MP remainder. Oh, we don't have access to that, do we? We might. Hold on. Is it not in here? I'm pretty sure it should be, right? It's not called that. What did I call it? Did I put under monster data by accident? No. Okay. Back to monster. It's called, oh, it's called Mana Remainder. A little bit inconsistency with the naming. I think I'm gonna call it MP Remainder. So let me refactor that real quick. Because I keep using mana instead of MP, so it's been a little confusing. I'm just gonna stick with, I'll call it mana, but all the variables will use MP. So MP remainder is now valid. So test monster should have 0.5 MP remainder. Should have half a mana point in stock. And then after 1 more second of the game running, the test monster should now have 1 mana point. And the should have an empty mana stock. So mana remainder becomes 0 after this, and MP becomes 1. So now let's go ahead and run this unit test and see if mana is working properly in all these scenarios. Hopefully it does. Just waiting for the recompile. And then after this, we can do our first commit. We've made quite a few changes. We've basically set up all the mana systems. So next we're going to look into the ability systems. We'll probably start with the randomize actions part of it. Actually, let's start here at the casting bit. So I'm going to make it so every single monster that can cast abilities has to have a casting animation defined. If the casting animation is not defined, then we're gonna assume, or let's just stop the game. Let's assume that we have to have that, right? Also, let me update these real quick. 2 images on the idle animation, 3 images on the walk animation, 4 on the attack, 4 on death, and 4 on casting. Just using my sample example tile sheet for now until we get the real sprites in later. Still waiting. Yeah, we're gonna crash if that happens. So we're gonna go to monster data again. We're already here, and we're gonna go to initialize monster data. Let's see if the test ran. Test failed. It said expected 0, actual value was 0.5. Test monster should have half a mana point in stock. So it failed on the MP remainder portion. So let's take a look why that would be. First, I'll just take a quick look at the code involved. MP remainder should go up by fmod, get MP recovery, modulus by 1. Is MP recovery float? Yes. So fmod seems to be the correct play here. We could also use standard mod. Standard mod is the templated version of, or is it still fmod? I guess it's still fmod. I don't think there's a difference here. Fmod, fmin, fmax should be exactly the same, honestly. Okay, so never mind about that. I thought there was a mod for a templated version. So this is a little strange. So we got this not returning correctly. So how about we go, so we're gonna break point obviously when we get into here, but let's break point after the other updates. So let's get to this game update call and we'll go from there. So I'm going to debug from this breakpoint. Let's go ahead and run it again. And we'll see what happens. Alright, so we've hit this breakpoint. Next, we want to go into the mana recovery timer portion of the code. So we hit this breakpoint. We have 10 MP. Why do we have 10 MP? Test monster should start with 0 mana. Test monster should still have 0 mana. How do we have 10 MP here? Also, how would the test have passed if our mana value is 10? That should have failed, right? Now I'm confused. Is it lying to me? What happens when I let this line run? MP goes to 15. The 5 is coming from the other monster. Am I running this for... Oh, the other monster's update code still runs. So that was the Skeleton Fire Mage's MP tick. So I should have... excuse me. I should have looked at which monster we were on. So let me... So nothing bad happened, just... I didn't realize we left that monster spawned in. We could despawn it, but... Let's just realize that we have 2 monsters on the field, and they're both going to run their update codes. So we're going to go to that other breakpoint first. And then now, I'm going to enter into mana recovery. And before we continue, we need to first realize what we are. Who are we? So... how can I do this? Can I make a... Okay, here we go. So I want to add a watch. Can I not... Hello? Quick watch? No. I don't know if I can add like an overhead thing for variables not in here. I feel like I should be able to. Like... That would make sense, right? Because I would like to pop one out before a variable that's... I want to pop it up for this. Like, what is this right now? If I can make that pop up without adding it to the watch window, I would just like to have it pop up. Like, maybe I could do something like this. I just put this, and then I do... Add watch? No, that just copies it. Which is essentially pointless. Show pinned member names in values. That doesn't really work or make sense. Show only pinned members. No. Okay. I'm gonna look this up real fast. Add value to overhead debug display Visual Studio. I don't know how to... The hardest part about searching for something is knowing what you're trying to find. How to display variable values inline during debugging. Enable debug inline values. I don't think this is what I'm looking for. But that's kind of cool. Like, I know in the JavaScript, when you're debugging JavaScript, yeah, you kind of see the values like next to the variables. So that's kind of cool. Wait, is this VS Code? This is VS Code. Okay, I was about to say, I'm like, this looks very VS Code-like. I clicked the wrong one. Set debugging options, debugger options. Not really what I'm looking for. Anyway, I just wanted to see, but we'll look at it here. So this right now is the Skeleton Fire Mage, so we're going to ignore this one and go to the next monster. This is still the Skeleton Fire Mage in-game update. I don't know why it's running it twice. Oh, it must be running it down... Wait. Is it running this update? Does that mean the test passed? That can't be right. Okay, then it just test fails on me. How do you type with nails like this? Just practice. I actually got a nice keyboard. My girlfriend got me a nice keyboard recently. That makes it easier to type with nails. I just need very light, like, keycaps. Like, very light switches. The lighter the switch, the nicer it is on your nails. Like, it's easier to type with them. but I was using like a very heavy Razer keyboard. Like these switches, it's literally right back here. But these switches are extremely hard to type with. And so I had to buy these little like extenders so that every key is like really popped out so that I can actually press down on it because of how much pressure I have to exert. So if I have a really light pressure keyboard like I do now, it's very easy to type even with nails. It's just learning to change where you press down on, but it can still be done. Okay, so this just isn't running at all, which is interesting. Let's see, because after 1 second, Test Monster should have half a mana point in stock. Oh, I see the problem is mana recovery timer didn't trigger yet. Mana recovery timer is supposed to happen every second, but we might not necessarily get 1 mana point, right? Because this is adding an int to a float, which should result in 0. This should have still ran, though. That's my thing, is this should have still ran. Why didn't it? Did I spawn the wrong monster? No, I spawned a test name monster. I guess I'm just confused. Why didn't we see the update code for the test monster? Okay, we're definitely have to investigate more, because that didn't even run... The test monster didn't even show up, but the Skeleton Fire Mage showed up twice, so that's telling me the other one must have been the test monster, and I'm just not reading it right. Okay, so we hit update again. We're gonna go inside the mana recovery timer portion of the code. This right now is the Skeleton Fire Mage. So we said we're gonna ignore that. So I'm gonna hit next. And then we're looking at, it looks like Skeleton Fire Mage again, according to this debug value. Which is strange because it's running twice. And clearly, so I'm going to... Oh! The test monster has no abilities. That's the problem. So the test monster never will gain mana because it has no abilities. We actually, checked for that. So let's add an ability to the test monster. So that's the issue. I forgot about that check. It needs an ability in order for the mana system to even start working. So let's make it, let's do the same thing. Let's just call it Meteor, and let's give it a 50 MP cost and a 40% chance of happening. Just some random values here, so that it has an ability, so the mana actually ticks. Now, I'm curious if it'll just work, if I even need to debug anymore. Hopefully that's all that's required. We should be good. So it still failed. This time it says test monster should now have 1 mana point failed, which is different than before. So after 1 second we expected the mana to increment by 1, so why didn't it, is the question. So the mana half point got reserved properly, so that's good. So why didn't the remainder... Oh, I put greater than 1. I should have put greater than or equal to, because it's probably just equal to 0.5 plus 0.5, right? So yeah, let's try that one more time. how do I handle physics like collision and stuff? The easiest way is to just use AABB, axis aligned bounding boxes, and I use circle collisions for like entity versus entity. That's typically how you do it, right? Is you either use rectangles or use circles, and if you want more complex hitboxes, you just use a combination of rectangles and circles. I also sometimes use cones. Cones are very easy because it's basically you check if it's within a certain angle, and then you do a distance check. So it's essentially just a more complicated circle check. So cone, circle, rectangles. Just keep the shapes simple and the results are simple. If you're wondering about the actual like movement physics, we do use like friction, so when something hits something else, it gets a velocity, and then the friction says, okay, if you have a velocity and nothing's acting on you, like nothing's setting your velocity, then you will slow down at a certain rate. So it's like you have a force, it's like you get pushed in a certain direction, you have a vector pointing in a direction with some magnitude and a direction. Decrease the magnitude, you slow down until you hit 0. Just like very rudimentary physics, right? You don't need anything crazy most of the time. And then for monsters like colliding with players or other monsters, we just have a little bounce off. It makes it a little more fun. I think that's pretty much everything. In terms of like how we make sure or how we determine collisions for like the maps and stuff, every tile has a collision box, and then I just read this data into my game. So I think there's a more detailed one. Where do I go? Oh, down here. So the tile sets, right? If I go to like the tiles, let me find one. Like, I don't think this one's mapped out, but any tile sheet that I already have made, like these guys, if I click on them, they typically have these like rectangles that fill up whatever I'd like in terms of collisions. So it'll never be like the full tile is a collision, but like half a tile, a quarter of a tile, just the sides of the tile. Like, in terms of collision, usually we're only getting the parts that seem to really matter when it comes to hitting a solid object. So this is still happening. Test monster should still have 1 mana point. Did I run that correctly? Okay. So did I never stop the test? I think I forgot to stop the test. Okay. So now run it. But if you want to see actual specific code, I could go into more detail. I don't mind. It's been a long time since I've had to touch it, but it's all there. In terms of making sure like nothing goes through other stuff, like what if something goes really fast, we do we divide every movement by 10 and do individual like checks. You can think of it as like if you're gonna move 10 pixels in a frame, we divide it by 10 and check every pixel. So if you're moving like 40 units per frame, we divide that by 10 and check every 4 pixels to see if you're gonna go through something. It's just an easy way to make sure you're not gonna like phase through a wall when you shouldn't. I'm trying to find... Okay, this is kind of it. So this is like the physics of a monster bumping into another monster. So this would be like iterate through all monsters, check to see if the radii are... So basically you do a circle check, right? Position, radii, sum of radii. If distance is less than the sum of radii, they're within each other's bubbles. So then, if you detect a collision, we perform a collision function against both of them, The collision function, I think that's just a callback, but we draw a line between them. Both of them gets bounced back by some amount. It's just like a displacement distance, so that they're both equally separated from each other, so they're not intersecting anymore. And we have a little like knockback strength, so they knock each other back a bit. That's all. A lot of it has been abstracted out, so this is still like not even the full picture, because like, what is a knockback? A knockback is a velocity set in a certain direction. Again, it's these magnitude vectors with a velocity and a magnitude. Magnitude, angle. Kind of deal. Okay. Test is still failing. Same place. Alright. Clearly something's up, so let's debug now. We definitely have an ability this time, so there should in no way the mana update does not work. In theory. And player has similar stuff. Player is more involved. Well, that's not true. Everybody has terrain collision too. So like terrain collision actually happens when we try to set the position. So it's like, okay, well, if we don't bump into a monster, okay, what's next? Now we try to set our position to wherever we want to move to. So we have a set X and a set Y function. The set X function checks to see if we can actually go there, which includes checking, is it inside like a boss arena? If it's a boss, it's checking there's no collision with the tile. So to determine if there's a tile there, we have to see if it overlaps with anything in our tile map. So we know what position we're at, so we can basically clamp it to a tile, and then we just check that tile. So it's like a lookup. So we're not iterating through like every single tile in the game. That would be very inefficient and would probably bring the game to a crawl. We just check whatever tile we're currently standing on, and if so, if there is no collision, then we move. Then we do the same for Y. Then we check X again in case. The logic is if you have to move in two directions in a game, like X and Y, if you can't move in the X direction, try the Y direction first, and if the Y direction is successful, try to do the X direction again. Because if the X direction works after, then you can kind of do this like diagonal movement to get around something. It's actually kind of nice. So we want to always check, like, can we move horizontally before and after? And you can do the same thing with Y as well, and in fact we should, in theory, call it again. Like, I actually don't know why. This might actually be a bug. If result X and not result Y, we should be trying to set Y after we've moved horizontally, right? Like, that might actually be a bug. That's interesting. I never thought about that. I'm going to put a pin in this and come back to it, because I think that's actually supposed to be there. So we're just gonna put a pin in this. You can actually make to-dos in Visual Studio, so I'm actually gonna do that. I think you just literally type to-do and then it goes in a list. I'm not gonna put anything in it, but it will be there. I think it's under View, Task List. Here we go. Yeah. It's funny. Oh, well, it's blocked on y'all's thing. I can do this. Alright. So every time I have like a to-do, or even if I guess it's looking for like a exclamation point or a colon. Because if I look at this task list, yeah, I have like to-do, 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 to-do. But also all my hack alerts are here. So I put a hack alert anytime I'm doing something really funky. So this is probably the most important use of a comment. is if you are doing something terrible and you need to make sure future self you or any other coder needs to know, hey, something bad is happening here or something weird is happening here, this is the perfect time to put a comment. So for me, I always put hack alerts. I'm like, this is very hackish. And it would go something like, this is probably an item since we populated item lists using this name for the components. So we assume there are menu item button classes. So we're saying that we're purposely dynamic pointer casting this to a menu item button because we know there's supposed to be menu item buttons. But in theory, we never found out if they were. We're assuming they are. We made that assumption. So sometimes I put hack alerts in because I need to know this code is doing something a little bit weird. But yeah, I have a lot of to-dos. I just added to the to-do list. So now it's right there. So we'll be back to it later. It's the task list. So we want to find out what is going on with this, because we tried to fix this and so far it hasn't worked. How do you keep track of all the collision objects? For every frame, I think we need to loop through all the collisions and check whether they're colliding with the player or projectiles. Ah, yes. Okay. So the way I have it set up is monsters check for all... Monsters are responsible for all collisions with other monsters. If you handle it in one monster, then another monster... That monster will no longer be in collision when it checks for that same monster. If that makes sense. So, let's say you have monster A, B, and C, and monster A and B run into each other. So, if you resolve it, if you then iterate through the list of monsters, and you do monster A first, you resolve both of their collisions and make sure they're non-collision. That's the important part. If monster A and B no longer collide at the end of that collision resolution, then you've done your job, and now when it gets to B, B is no longer in collision with A. It might be in collision with C now, but it's resolved with A, so now you won't have like this infinite loop of A resolves B, but B is in collision with A, so then you end up with two collisions, which creates bugs. So that's a big thing to avoid. But the player is responsible for checking all collisions with monsters itself. The monsters don't do it because then it just adds even more confusion, and it's possible for the same monster, after it's been moved by another monster, to then not be in collision with the player. So the player handles that itself by iterating through the monster list as well, and does it itself. And if there is a collision, then it does basically the same thing, does kind of a knockback as well. But yes, you loop through everything. One thing I like to do though is to try to get rid of stuff quickly. So for example, we actually have monsters that become inactive within a certain range. So if I go back to... I think it's in monster still. Let me just back up for a second. Okay. Well, I mean, you're trying to cut the list pretty quickly, so it's usually not... This isn't... Even though you're iterating through every monster, it's not actually that slow because most monsters aren't even in range or overlapping. So you immediately cut them out from the list. That's a very fast, quick check. Just circle versus circle check. Or two distances added together. Basically... And you make sure you're not invulnerable. Like, it's how you explained it. Every frame, loop through all collision, anything that you can collide with, right? We only have to check for collisions with terrain whenever we move, which is why I have this set pause command in the first place. If the player like presses a key to go forward, that's when we use set pause. If the player gets knocked around, we use set pause. Anytime there's a movement, then we do the set X, set Y functions, which then checks the terrain collision because it's like, okay, you have to move. check if there's any terrain in the way. We already resolved everything with moving entities, so do like dynamic versus dynamic, and then dynamic versus static after. Because static objects will never move, so they have, in a sense, lower priority. Because they are always going to be there, and you want to make sure all the dynamic collisions are resolved first before... Because, like, you'll end up in a situation where if you run into a wall, you resolve that first, now you're in collision with an enemy, you resolve the enemy collision, you're back in the wall, you have this going on. So instead you do it the other way, resolve dynamic collision so everybody's separated, then move. It's kind of the same thing, but at least with static ones, you are resolved after one turn. Versus with static versus dynamic, you might not even resolve it. You might just have things stuck in each other for forever. That's the order I do it, and it works out. It's also very hard to explain this when I think about it. I'm like, wow, I just kind of did it, but to intuitively explain why I did it, that's actually kind of hard. I had to really think about, okay, what was I actually thinking when I went through this? So on this game update tick, we are updating another second, and another second means the mana recovery timer should have ran again. This is again the Skeleton Fire Mage, so we're going to skip him, or her, and we're onto the test name monster. Which again, the mana recovery timer just hit 0 seconds, so we're going to gain again mana. So once again we gained 0, we gained 0 mana. We didn't increase the mana here. Oops, that's what we forgot to do. So we actually found a bug in our code thanks to unit testing. If we just assumed it worked and didn't unit test it, we probably wouldn't have found this bug until way later and been like, why isn't mana recovery working? There you go. Increment mana by 1 every time we reduce the mana remainder. Or more importantly, this bug only happens when there's a mana remainder. So we wouldn't have spotted that until somebody had like 3.5 mana, and after a minute we're like, wait a second, they should have 10 more mana by this point. Like, to detect that would have been a lot more awful in real time versus through a unit test. So once again, unit test helping us test exact behaviors that we want, and basically saved us from having buggy code. This is the power of unit testing and why it is important to do, despite it taking a while. And at first it seems like, oh, like this is taking up so much time, we could be writing like the fancy ability code right now. But no, we have to make sure this test works. So this test passes, and the beautiful part is this will now be tested every time we run our test suite. We no longer have to worry about this, and we just hired a new person to test this over and over for us. I think that's the beautiful part about unit testing, is once it's there, it's there. And you'll always know your game is working right now, if you ever change it, or refactor, or move stuff. Great, so let's go ahead and commit this first. Mana system is completed. And while we're in here doing our commit, I like to run the full test suite. So we'll let that run in the background, and it's going to test every single unit test for us while we do this. So this is implemented mana, well, not just mana, but the mage configuration reading inside yeah, configuration reading. That's one thing we did. And the other thing is implemented mana and mana recovery mechanics. So this is release build 12401. And we also implemented unit tests. Implemented mana unit testing. Cool. So we can go ahead and commit that now. And go ahead and finally push this branch for the first time. Yay! We also implemented the graphics, but I forgot to write that. So now that this is pushed, we have a brand new branch on our repo. And we can go ahead and work on the next aspect. So now we have to work on the casting bit. So we have a bunch of abilities. This monster is running around with all these abilities. Meanwhile, in the background, we have our unit testing run. Our unit tests are being ran in the background, I should say. I like to keep them right there. And so while that's happening, yeah, let's talk about this. So monsters are running around doing their own thing. Every, so I think in the spec it says like every second, it's like you're checking to see if you can do this. So let's see here. Mage behavior. Every second, look up the ability list and cast an ability with a certain probability. So we're gonna be implementing this part next. This will be in the update, in the general update code of a monster. So normally a monster is running its strategy, right? That's usually what it's doing the whole time. But this is gonna be outside of the strategy. It's gonna be like, okay, run the strategy, but then it's possible that we're gonna end up stopping what we're doing and casting instead. It just becomes its own thing. And if that happens, then none of this matters. Like, can move actually is going to incorporate the casting part of this. So we're going to be adjusting this so that we can't move while we're doing run strategy. But it's like, if it's interrupting, then that's just part of the caster's, like, moveset. Which is interesting. Also, we'll be adding a state. The state will be casting, of course. There's quite a few here, including casting already, because we had to use it for the player. So it's going to be the same thing for monsters now. We're just adding to this state machine on top of a state machine, essentially. So yeah, we also have to be in a normal state, and we have to be able to move already before we can decide if we're casting. So I think, so to speak, we're going to be inside of here. We have to decide if we're casting and then actually cast. I think it would be beneficial for us to now figure out how to populate this percentage chance casting ability. It's like, okay, you have a 60% chance to cast Meteor and a 10% chance to cast Firebolt. Does that mean you have a 70% chance to do something? Or you check the 60%, then you check the 10%. Because if you do it that way, it's like you have a, what? 60.6% chance or something to actually do something? Is that how this works? Like, these two are these two individual events? I want to say yes. Like, we would iterate through all of them and see if we do them, right? So it'd be like, okay, let's try that then. Let's do standard for each. But if we find one, we have to stop the loop. So standard for each might not be super useful here because we have to actually stop in the middle of one. Standard for each is only useful if we know we're going to iterate through all of them. So let's do a standard for loop, and we're going to check. So we're going to grab a monster ability data from this. We're basically grabbing the ability list and then iterating through them. Tests are still running, about halfway done. So, data. We'll do it from get abilities. And now we're gonna do a random dice roll. Oh, what happened here? Qualifiers dropped, so it's const, so the data type coming out is gonna be const as well. Const reference. So we're gonna do if data percent chance, cast chance is, so we basically roll a random number between 0 and 1. So util random from 0 to 1. And we're going to say, is this number less than or equal to the percent cast chance? If so, then that percentage has been successfully fulfilled, which means we will do that instead. So essentially, let's add a boolean. Cast occurred. Do we even need that when we could just modify state? I guess we could just look at state. So then we do an if can move again. So does that mean if we have two if can moves inside of each other, we should separate them for the sake of reading? Like, okay, if we can move, try to perform casts, then if we can move after that fact, after we've done the casting stuff, then try to run the strategy, if we can still move after that. I think that makes more sense. So this is like, try to cast. Again, like I said, I don't use it too often, but sometimes if we're trying to describe what this is, we can write it out with the label. I could turn it into a function and call it like try cast or something, but why make it a function when I could just write a label here? Or I could put a comment, right? Either would work. And then this would be the actual run strategy. I just think it's an easy way to label things without having to comment them out. Or because at the same time, it's like, it's all the same, right? So I'd rather do something like that. That's just my personal preference. We code how we like. I'm not gonna be throwing go-tos in here though, I promise. So if this happens, we're gonna cast our ability. So I think we're gonna have multiple things happening here, and I do want a cast ability command. So we're probably just gonna provide the ability data and go from there, because a couple things are gonna have to happen. For one, how does the game know that when we cast Meteor, we're gonna do like, we're gonna spawn a meteor? How does it know when we cast Fireball, it's gonna shoot out a firebolt, right? We're gonna need to hook into somewhere like how to interpret this ability and do something with it. Fireball! I cast Fireball! You silly. So I think this is where this is gonna happen, where it's like, okay, here's the known list of abilities, converted to an actual, like, something spawning on the field, right? And cast ability also has to set up the cast timers and everything, so we'll handle that in there. We basically do everything, set everything up. We kind of have a system going for the player already, we just have to do it for monsters now. They basically have, like, a precast, and then they have the actual cast. So right now we're doing the precast part of it. So cast ability. Let's go back to the header and let's add the cast ability function into here. It's going to be a void function. It doesn't need to return anything. Now, next question, can we interrupt a caster? I feel like we should be able to. Like, would it be... Would it be an interesting mechanic if you can bump into the mages to move them to stop them from casting? Does that really make sense? Because normally when you bump into a monster, you take damage. So would it be an interesting risk-reward to be like, oh, I could cancel their cast by bumping into them for the damage? It sounds interesting, but I don't know if it's intended. I'm going to ask our game designer what he thinks about that, because that's a very interesting thing. Can monsters be bumped out of casting like the player can? Would that be an interesting risk/reward playstyle thing? Or would that be dumb? Because normally you take collision damage. It's just like an interesting thought, because it's like, oh, I could hurt myself, but I could also stop the monster from potentially doing something more hurtful? It's an interesting idea, right? Nothing crazy. We're just gonna assume right now we can't stop monsters if we bump into them. Like, they're just gonna get bumped around while trying to cast. I think we're just gonna make that assumption, because I feel like that's gonna be the answer. It's like, oh, I didn't really think about this. It's probably not happening. Okay. Okay, so castability. Okay, so for castability, the monster is going to become in casting state for a certain amount of time. And also, we have to update that can move function to return false while we are casting. Because now, we obviously can't move while we're casting. So we're gonna have like a casting timer, which doesn't exist yet. So casting timer has to be equal to 0. So for castability, we're gonna set the casting timer, and you see here we have a cast info class. This might actually be useful for us too, because it provides some information. It provides what the name of the ability we're about to cast is, the timer, the total time. I think the timer is like the current countdown of it, and then the total time is how much time does it take from beginning to end, and where it's going to be casted. I think this is a very useful structure to use, because then we can have some kind of like cast has finished function, which then creates the bullet or whatever to do the thing. Okay. My game designer has said that it might be interesting to have some counterplay to that, considering some of them are quite deadly. So we're gonna go with that for now. That also means that I am going to change the collision damage of the monsters to be from nothing to actually dealing damage to you if you bounce into them. Because, yeah. If you choose to cancel via collision, that's what happens. There are some abilities, such as the Warrior's Ground Slam, that also knock things around. So if you end up using one of those, you can also disrupt a cast, which I think is very cool counterplay. It might be nice to have something like that. Equally, I think there's one other ability that like stuns or immobilizes, and I think that would count too. So that would be nice. So this cast info, let's go ahead and set this up. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to have an optional, standard optional cast info. And the reason I'm doing an optional is because it's possible we're not casting right now, so there's nothing in here. It's just going to be empty. And an optional is the perfect thing to wrap around a data structure like that. So we're going to try this. Standard optional, cast info, current cast. And I think it's at this point when we can do castability that we're also changing the state. So we want to do like a set state to casting. So I wonder if we set the state to casting, if we're gonna be able to, if it's gonna get unset by things that move you, right? Because what if we get stuck in this casting state? Like, I feel like that would be a thing, right? Like, is it better not to use the cast system and just rely on the cast timer? I think that might actually be better. But if we have a casting timer, should we just look at the current cast and see if there's one that exists? Because cast info contains a timer. So we can do something like this instead. We can say if current cast and current cast, I think you can do this. Timer is equal to 0, then we're allowed to move. Or we can just say and not current cast. Like, if the cast is done, then current cast should no longer exist. I think I like that better. And one thing about standard optional, it comes with Boolean checking, so you can use true to indicate yes, it exists, or false to indicate it doesn't exist. And I like that syntax a lot. So for castability, we're just going to set the current cast, and that would tell us that we're currently casting something. So we set it equal to cast info, and we just set up the constructor with the information we want. So once again, we have to look at that cast info class or struct. It's currently under player, but that's fine. And in cast info, we have the name of the ability. So that's going to come from... Oh, right. So castability also includes the... what do you call it? The ability data. Monster ability data. Yeah. And it's going to be a const reference. So we'll include that part too. So it's data dot name, and then I think we're also going to need to know how much mana it costs. Like, that should be included in here. Does that mean I have to go back and update the other cast info with what I want? Because this was just strictly used for the player, like, for convenience. But I guess we can include the, like, MP cost if we want to. But then we're relying on the MP cost to exist if we use this elsewhere. And can we get that information? Now I'm thinking about, okay, I have to update cast info anywhere I use it now. And where do we use it is the question. So I'm just looking at all the references to it. Oh wow, we use it for the cast bar itself. I mean, I guess that makes sense. We use it for get cast info. Okay, how do we populate it? I guess that's it. We just populate it only in a few places. But, oh, so we have to check how we edit this. It's right here. So when we do cast spell, we add in all these things here. So we can also go ahead and say, okay, let's add in the MP cost, right? And if we do that, then it's also up to date for the player. And I guess that would make sense. That would be the best way to do that if we want to update the structure and keep it relevant. Because someday I might refer to the MP cost. I expect that value to be populated correctly, whether a player or a monster uses this structure. So now back over here in MP cost, or in a monster, we can do the same thing. So the cast timer is going to be equal to the cooldown of the ability, which we actually don't know. So, or excuse me, the cast time? Shoot. The cast time is not included in this data. It's supposed to be like built into the ability. So let's go back. It's like our data is not quite structured the way we need it to be, right? So the meteor is a 1.5 second cast, 300 range, 200% attack. It's like, so that cast time needs to be included somewhere and known. So it's like we need another place that holds this information. It's like, do we want these abilities to have different cast times per enemy? I mean, maybe. Maybe, maybe not. Like, each ability is described. So, I don't know. Like, these are the only monsters that will have this. We don't have to make this super complicated. So, I think we can go back here and say, okay, define the cast time inside of the configuration file as well. How many seconds does it take to cast? For Meteor, it takes 1.5 seconds. For Firebolt, it takes 1 second. We can add that into our config and say the third option is, or the third value, is the cast time. If we want it to be instant, we say 0. Okay. So with that in place, we now have to go back to our config and modify that to represent that now. Now that we know we needed more information. So first, we're going to go to our struct that holds monster ability data. And we're just going to add the cast time to it, because we actually need that information. This makes it very easy because we don't have to actually adjust anything that receives the data. It will just be in here. We just have to modify where we get it from. So we go back to monsterdata.cpp, and under the place where we load in the ability data, we're now going to look for one more thing, which is the second key. And it should be a real value. And it should be the second index. And that will give us the cast time. Now, if we really want to, since this is an aggregate type, we actually could do this so we actually know what this means. We could say monster ability data and actually provide like .name equals, right, key, and we could say like this would be a little more verbose, but it would tell us exactly what these represent. That way they're not just some values that are... They're not just array values, and we have no idea what they would mean. We actually know what they're populating by typing them back in, like so. And to me, I think this is a perfect opportunity to use this, because it's not often that we are... we are filling out structs like this. So I think this makes more sense for something like here, where we're not exactly sure, okay, what is in 0, what's in 1, what's in 2. At a glance, I wouldn't be able to tell, but now with these being here, I can tell. So I really like this syntax, and I think I'm going to use it from now on whenever I have to populate structs. I really, really like that. So we're going to do that. Just for the sake of readability. And now the cast times are included in that structure. So we're going to go back to monster now that we have more information of what we're going to do in our cast info, and we're going to set these. So we're going to set the cast time, or excuse me. So here we are again. This is another instance, right? We don't know what's what. So we can actually do the exact same thing here. And now I know exactly what is what. So we're filling out the cast timer right now. And the cast timer is going to be set to cast time. And so is the cast total time. And I'm looking on my other screen to see what the order is, because I think the order has to be the same. Like, that's just a rule of this. But we could try messing with it. Like, let's try MP cost first and see what happens. I don't think it's allowed. Data, MP cost, and finally we have cast pause, and the cast pause by default will be blank, but I guess we could specify an optional for it. So let's actually add this now. Cast ability by default. Hello? There we go. Control KO. So by default, the position will be nothing. And if it's nothing, or if it's 0, 0, I guess, then we're just going to assign it or cast it at the position of the monster. I think that makes sense. But yes, we can see this is invalid. This is not allowed if we're defining it this way. Out of order initializers are not allowed. So I just wanted to confirm that is still a thing. And so now we're going to say for pause, we're actually going to do a ternary here. If pause is equal to blank, use the monster's position. We'll do get pause here so it looks less confusing. Or actually, if we don't do get pause here, I think it uses that pause variable again, which is exactly what we don't want. Also, it doesn't know what this is. This is a VF2D. And then we have an else. If it's not equal to that, then just use pause. Yeah, so it's gonna look like that. And I like this a lot more for initializing structs, because again, at a glance, we can see what members are being assigned what. It's a little more clear here because most of these values are named the same, but I still like this for structs because it's very verbose and tells me exactly what we're doing. So setting the current cast will indirectly make it so the canMove function returns false, which means we can't move anymore. The next thing to do is to set the animation. So set animation or perform animation. We're going to be performing casting. Again, we're now going to make an assumption that this monster will have a casting animation if it can cast. So we're gonna have to make a check, like a pre-check, when the game is initializing to see if we don't have the casting animation. So let's go back to monster data, and that's kind of up here where we're reading in the animations. This is where it all happens. So, what we want to do is we're going to check if the monster has abilities. If it has abilities, we need to then check if animations, if the key animations casting exists. So we'll do it like this. Wherever the ability stuff is. So if monsters dot abilities, or excuse me, monster dot abilities dot size is greater than 0, then we're going to expect that it has, so and not, has property inside of animations, casting, because if we go look at it real quick, this is what we're expecting. We're expecting in animations, we have the casting animation, which is a list of different values there. Then we come back here and we say, okay, well, if you don't have that, then we're going to error out and warn you that, hey, this monster casts stuff and doesn't have a casting animation. And we'll standard format this one. So we'll say, warning, monster whatever does not have a casting animation, but can perform blank abilities. Casting animation is mandatory for casters. We're just gonna make that a rule. So first blank is the monster name, monster display name. So get display name. Second one is the amount of abilities, so that's get abilities dot size, and that should be it. So that should complain. Let me see. So our game has passed all the unit tests since the last time we compiled, so that's good. Let's go back to our release build. And let's see if we can compile and run our game right now. Because right now the game should be runnable, but then we'll test another monster that does not have casting animations, but should. Ooh, we got errors. Let me see. Maybe we just weren't done. Cast info, undeclared identifier. Okay. Yes, we need to... This could get tricky, because I think player includes monster, right? Does player include monster? It does. So we can't include the monster header or the player header in monster because that would be like, that would cause recursion. And once you have header recursion, everything gets fucky. So what we have to do is we have to take this cast info struct and we need to isolate it into its own header file and then include that header file in both header files. That way we don't end up with circular references. This is what you do when you have to separate your codes, your structs into its own places, its own classes. It's just how C++ and C source files and header file linking works. When a lot of C++ and C programmers are starting out and they try to separate their project into multiple files, they run into headaches like this, and then they get weird errors, and they're like, what the hell happened? And then they realize that the reason all this is happening is because, and it doesn't even tell you anything useful. It just literally will spit out random garbage because you're like, no, my code is not wrong. It's not doing that. That's usually when you have a problem with your headers. So this is going to be castinfo.h. And we'll just put that in there. So that's that. It does need string and it needs VF2D. Both are fine because they're not going to include the headers that this does. So we can include OLC Pixel Game Engine. That's fine to include. And we're also going to include a string. Actually, OLC Pixel Game Engine includes string. I do need to bring over the copyright and license information in my header file. Just keep it consistent here. Great. So with that in mind, now castinfo is its own header file. We can actually include it for player. So include castinfo. And as I see this, I'm gonna start removing these spaces because I'm switching to this. When I find a new programming style I like, I start switching everything over as I see it wrong in places. So I've decided that I'm no longer gonna include the space between include and the file name. Just something I've decided. Executive decision. So that's what we're doing. Are you okay, Visual Studio? Are you okay? You don't look so good right now. It's like, I disapprove of that. I don't like what you just did. No, it's probably catching up because it's got to add this new include to like the database or whatever. So back in monster data now, we can actually make known what castinfo is by including it. And now we won't have any header recursion because both of these now rely on that, but they don't rely on each other. If you have any dependencies like that, you usually have to separate out your code. That's usually the sign. So, with all that in mind, we're back over here. Castinfo should be known. We can try building the code again. See how it goes. It looks like the build has started. Excellent. It's going to take a while because naturally it's a gigantic project. So I will take this opportunity to use the restroom. Be right back. Right. All right, we're back. We end up with more errors. There's been a redefinition of default argument parameter 1. I do this a lot, and it's completely by accident, but here it is. That is not fun. So we're getting rid of that one. And we're running it again. And then we should be good. Hopefully. My gosh, that one I do so often. It's so dumb. Okay. So, we do have our game running, and it's not complaining about the animation thing. So let's do a test. Let's close the game. Let's remove this casting animation from our caster, who's clearly a caster. And then let's try that again. Oh, restart the game, please. And this time we actually crash, and it says, warning, Monster Skeleton Fire Mage does not have a casting animation, but can perform 2 abilities. Casting animation is mandatory for casters. So, thankfully, it works. Yay! Alright, so we're gonna put that back, and then now we're gonna work on actually making this cast work. So, I mean, I am going to commit. It's a small one, and it's technically, the feature's not even done yet, but ability structures prepared for monster casting, and yeah, added prerequisite casting, I guess you could call it like functions for monsters and pre-checks. Okay, and that is release build 12404. Cool. So we have a little bit more time, so we get to try to figure out how to make this all connect now and actually get an ability active in the game. So right here, we've performed our casting animation for our monster. So the next thing we want to do is make it so we actually perform this cast. So if we have a cast going on, we need to decrement the cooldown or the casting timer until it's low enough to where we actually cast the ability. Also, hello Blah, welcome to the stream. So we're gonna go back to update and actually handle that now. So, sneezing. Oh, God. Ooh, that was a big one. If current cast, which means we're actually casting something, we're gonna have to reduce the current cast time down. So current cast, cast timer minus equals elapsed time. And then if it hits 0, spin! Yeah! Spinning! Whee! Spin, spin, spin. That's fun. I hope you're doing well, Blah. Good to see you. So, we're gonna see if the cast timer is less than or equal to 0. And if it is, it's time to actually complete the cast. So, this is more like perform spell. Or activate spell. I guess perform spell is really the name of it. And then current cast will be nullified. So we just do current cast dot reset, and reset will completely empty the structure. So now it's as if the monster wasn't casting anything in the first place. So perform spell. We're gonna perform the current cast. I think I will just literally send that in as the actual value. I think that's all we'll need there. So let's perform spell. Let's first add that function, because this is gonna be what connects, like, okay, so you've casted meteor. Well, what is meteor, right? Meteor is that a giant rock falling from the sky. This is where we have to define all that now. So this is where we're gonna do it. Perform spell. This is what connects everything all together. Although I think it would be great to make something that actually will connect these things and understand these things, but it's really like for the player, I implemented all the abilities like one by one, right? Hand by hand. The game doesn't know anything about what a meteor is versus what a firebolt is. I literally said, this is firebolt, this is meteor, this is ability 3 of the wizard, etc., right? They were all separately done. So yeah, we're kind of at that point where we're just doing that ourselves. So perform spell. We're gonna make them all happen here. We're basically gonna check for the name. We're gonna do a nice little switch statement, and based on the switch statement result, we're going to actually implement that. So switch, or not switch, sorry, you can't switch a string, so we'd have to do like, well, we have the casting data. It's going to be cast info. Whee! Just make it a const ref. Cast data. So if cast data dot name is equal to, and then we'll specify all the names here, and if we get to the bottom, an else statement, and we don't end up figuring out any spell that works for this, then essentially we're just going to error out because you provided an invalid spell, or unimplemented spell, I should say. So we're going to start with meteor. That's going to be our very first spell. And then we have our else ifs, and we'll keep doing that until we reach the bottom here. But if we had more abilities, like we only have 6 or so abilities, but let's say we had like 30 or 40 monster abilities, I would probably make a new class, a static class, that has a bunch of abilities in a list. Each ability has a function, like, that we define, and then it will run that function based on what ability name was provided. So for example, actually, I really like that idea. Why do I want to just make it that way anyway, instead of like this? I think it's partly because I don't want to be like, where are all the monster abilities? I want to put that data somewhere where I can access them, right? Like, what if I just made a monster ability.h and put everything in there? I really like that idea. I think that's a lot better than this if else if in this one perform spell function at the bottom of my file, which is probably not even going to be the bottom. We're going to add more stuff later, right? Like, this is kind of weird. So I think I want to fix that up by putting them in something that actually handles this. So here's what I'm thinking. Let's start with a monster ability file.h. In here, we're going to statically define all the abilities that exist. So, well, we're not going to define here, but we'll specify that they exist, right? So it'll be some kind of class monster ability. And in here, we're going to define a static variable for each ability. So it'll be like, and each ability will be I guess a function with all the details in it. No, it'll be a map with the ability name followed by a function with what that ability actually executes. I like that idea. So it will look like this. Inline static standard unordered map of string views. And yes, we can actually use string view here because this is going to be, it's just going to store const chars, which are going to be built into the program, so standard string view will naturally map them. So this is one of the few times we can actually use a string view versus a standard string, interestingly enough. So standard string view followed by standard function, and inside the function we would include, I guess, let's include the name of the spell, so spell name, which will be a string, of course. Let's include, or excuse me, it'll be a return type of void, and it will have the arguments spell name. What else would be useful? I guess all the information that we included in that file, right? Any of that could be useful for an ability. So spell name, spell mana cost, and spell cast time. All that could potentially be useful, but not really. Spell name, because we kind of handle that elsewhere. So maybe just the spell name and a position. Cast position. I don't really think there's much else we have to include, if I'm being for real. Everything else will just kind of happen, right? Maybe the monster that casted it? Source... Or, yeah, I guess the caster itself. The caster monster. Okay, I kind of like that. So that's going to be what that looks like. It's going to be an unordered map with a string view followed by a function with spell name, cast pause, caster monster. So what are all these? Well, let's include them. So first, we're going to include a string view. And then we have to include an unordered map. And then we have to include functions, or functional, I think is what the library is actually called. And finally, we have to define these usings. So, using spell name as a... Oh, I have caps lock on. That's no fun. Spell name is a standard string. Not a string buffer. I think I have to include strings separately. It's not a string view. And then we have using cast pause is actually a VF2D, which we don't know yet, so we have to include OLC Pixel Game Engine. Or actually, if we just need VF2D, I think we can include Geometry 2D. We'll see util Geometry 2D, because that should include VF2D without needing the whole header. And I can even do the same thing for monster data, I think. Or no, cast info? Yes. If we just need VF2D, that actually comes from the util geometry 2D. It's just that's what gets imported into the LC util underscore geometry 2D. There we go. Finally, my work is done. Yay! And we are almost done for the day too, unfortunately, but hello. Glad your work is done though. It's always good to hear. And finally, the caster monster is a monster. So that is going to need to be included. But how is it going to know what a monster ability is without including the header? Which means, once again... let me think about that. They would need to include in each other's headers. So unless I define this out elsewhere, I would need to make it a pointer, or I guess a reference would work. Either or, right? Let me think, what would be better? Let's do a standard weak pointer. I like that. So a caster monster is the weak pointer to the monster. Weak pointer, monster. That way we don't have to actually include the full definition, which means we don't have to include the monster header. We just specify it's a class monster. Like so. You in C++ like a fish in water. Right, code in C++? I just kind of do. That just is how I do. So finally we need a name for this variable. I'm just gonna call it the spells. And from there, so it'll be monster ability : spells. And then followed that by the name of the actual abilities. So we have to do that here now. So let's see. So for example, our first pairing will be a meteor. And then we would have our function somewhere, right? So these functions could all be stored in here. I mean, I'm not totally against that. It could look something like that. And again, we would just do one of these. And if we want to be more specific, we would also include the return type there. These need names, so it would be the spell name, cast position, I'm just calling that pause, and then the caster monster, M. So it looks something like that, and then we can throw in whatever code we want for Meteor there. Very advanced C++. As for game dev, most of the game devs I see here use C-flavored C++. That was my very first game jam entry into the OLC Pixel, or the OLC Code Jam 2021, I think. I didn't see it earlier, but yes, my well, I can just show you here, I guess. It was very much C flavored because I only knew C, but I wanted to try using the Pixel game engine. I think it was called Seasons of Loneliness? Seasons of Loneliness, yes. Or no, it was something in not Seasons of Loneliness. What was it called? I can't remember. But the theme was weather. Was it? Is it this? Hold on. It might be. Oh, it is. Yes. And this game jam entry was my first foray into C++. So here is one of the very few CPP files. Okay, Scratch that. The only CPP file. It was 4,751 lines of code, and on top of that, most of it was C structures, because I didn't know much about C++. So here, if we look at the top where I had plenty of fun things in here, let's see. Yeah, you can see I just initialized a bunch of things. A lot of heap allocations, so a lot of new. Because structs were easy enough to use, so I stuck with those. I have a int double pointer. Bool game flags 128. Initialize a static array. Size array. There's an object pointer. Namespace, class. So I was able to use a class, so there's a constructor, so that's good at least. Class. So I had that down, so at least I wasn't totally just using structs. But I also include everything in one file, so it's like no headers, no nothing. There's a couple of defines there. Enums. That's fun. And the code itself is like mostly just pointer stuff, like set things directly. Everything was public, right? Just like, because it was Game Jam. It's like code quick, code fast. And then I think my test game was like a Mirka chase thing. Yeah, so kind of like Snake, but it was based on Neopets Mirka chase thing. This was my first foray into testing the engine before I used it for the Game Jam. A lot of arrays, again, static sized arrays, just a bunch of variables at the top in one class, all ran, again, a lot of heap allocations. Yeah, just very basic programming to see if I could do it, and I was convinced I could. But yeah, after 6 years of using it, we've gotten to the point where we're pretty proficient in using the actual C++ bits of it, and also experimenting with some of the more modern stuff. So a lot of C++ 20 attempts, at least with using like ranges, views, and yeah. So I like to see what's out there, like what's new, and be like, ooh, I like that. I can actually use that in my code. So a lot of the times while I've been working on this project, it's 3 years old, right? There's been a lot of code I saw where I'm like, I could actually put that in my project. That would be beneficial. So my style of coding has kind of evolved from that mindset of like, I see something I like, I want to try and use it in my project. Where would it be good to be used? Where can I utilize it? Why would I utilize it, right? And then I end up developing my own style of it. So I think that's why I like C++ so much, is it's very expressive in that regard. You find things you like, and then your C++ kind of gets its own flavor. It's like, this is how I would design it, but somebody would design it in a very different way in C++. So this is the other ability. I'm just going to put right here for now, Firebolt. So my only big issue right now with doing this, and I'm seeing it now, is this is all going to be in this this one header. Hopefully the dependencies work out. If they don't work out, I'm going to have to do something, right? But like, for example, this monster, I'm going to have to extract that pointer, which means I need to know what members exist for a monster. So I can't just rely on this. So this has to go in a source file. We can't inline it, unfortunately, because I am about to extract all the things. So let's make I always try this first. I always try the inline, and then I, like 2 seconds in, I'm like, yep, source file time. It just always works out that way. I guess it's a good thing, because most things can't be inlined anyway, but it's always good to attempt. So monsterability.cpp. We're gonna include that header we just made. And we're gonna need this. All of this. And that is assigned to monster ability. There we go. So now we can define in here and use whatever headers we like, and we won't have any header recursion conflicts. And so the idea now is that we call these functions instead based on what we have here. So this is supposed to be public and static. And so we go back to monster, and instead of doing this mess, which we were about to get totally into, now we just do, well, first we include monster ability. So we know what that is. And then we go back down here and we say monster ability : spells, and then now we're going to access that array using @ provide the name of the spell we're interested in casting, and then we provide all the details. So now we're going to execute that function. We start with the spell name, so same thing again, ironically, followed by the arguments for it. So the position, I think it's supposed to be an... Oh wait, it's in cast data. I remember we did that. Followed by the caster monster, which is our weak pointer. So we just do... Oh, and this is for the monster class. So we can just send our weak pointer over there. Get weak pointer. And then it's ready to perform whatever spell dynamically at our will, and it will be done. Also, if we're in the middle of performing the casting animation, we need to stop that, so we'll just perform our, I guess, our idle animation, and then the normal AI will resume its thing. And that's pretty much that. That's all the spell handling. So now all we have to do is actually do something. So I guess we could test this, right? Oh, we still have to do the % chance thing, though. I guess that's going to be for next time. So I'm going to go to my to-do file. And the next thing we do is % chance ability picking. And making the abilities actually work. And I think I will implement all 6 mage abilities in one go. I'm going to do them all now, even though we're only working on the fire mage. That way they all exist, they're all there. We'll test them all out, of course, and then from there, we can pretty much just implement the rest of the mages without having to do much coding. So we're getting there. We're slowly building a flexible system that works for the mages. And everything's working out. All the structures are getting laid out. We're getting very close to where we need to be. So, laid out spell functions and casting system for monsters. This does build, right? Let me just make sure. Because we shouldn't submit a build that doesn't build. That wouldn't be great. And I guess we could also run the unit tests one more time to make sure that's good afterwards. And we'll call it here for the day. But yeah, great coding session. I hope you all enjoyed today. Today was a lot of fun. We got to implement something new in our engine. We usually don't get to do that. And tomorrow we'll finish it up and really get to see the results of it. So my ideas, like for example Meteor, already exist for the player. So if we look at, we'll just take a quick peek inside of bullet types, we'll see there is a... where is it? Oh, I will find you. Here it is. The meteor effect, right? So my idea is that we actually play this effect and we can make use of it. It's got a lot of parameters already, so I think it won't be too hard to add what we need to make it work for our actual meteor. So we're going to use this meteor and just modify it a little bit to make it work right. And then we have the firebolt bullet, which actually already works. There's a monster hit function already implemented. There's already a player hit function implemented. We just have to set it as a non-friendly bullet, see how it works, and fix it up if we have to, right? But Meteor, right now it only hurts monsters, of course, so we have to make it another version that will hit players. And of course make it a lot smaller. This meteor is huge. So, and the reason why I did this was because we had upgrades for the meteor, so that now it has a comet, a solar flare, a comet flare. So we kind of already made it so this is very customizable. So Fireball and Meteor are like super good. We're just gonna have to add stuff for the new abilities. Like we got 2 ice abilities, which don't exist for the player, and I think lightning abilities, which we kind of have. So we'll have to see. It looks like our build succeeded. So this is release build 12405. We'll go ahead and submit that. And while I get ready to leave, we'll run the unit tests in the background, and hopefully they all pass for next time, and we know our game is still good. So, with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed today's coding session. I had a very good time. It's been a lot of fun implementing something new. It's been a while. So, hope you all enjoyed, and take care. Until tomorrow, we continue on the spell system. Thanks for watching. Bye.